hamburger patties. I had put some cheese on top and I drizzled some ketchup on top and on a pea. And on the side, I have sweet peas. I got hamburger patties with rice and I put cheese on top. So, what are you guys eating? I like to mix my rice with the peas a little bit. Mm, it's a big piece. And, I'll be telling a story called Guttersnipe. Yeah, it's a big boy. You guys mix your vegetables with your rice. I know I do. Has onions in the hamburger patty too. It's delicious. It's on top. Hamburger with cheese. Last bite. Some ice cold water. Well, this is a quick story that I'm gonna tell called the gutter snipe, and it's about this 12-year-old boy. His name was Claiborne Washington. Claiborne Washington has been living on the streets for about 5 years. He used to live with his aunt, his mother's sister, but his aunt had threw him out. She had threw him out the house, and he had no choice but to survive on the streets. And he was going through rough times while living on the streets. He was being pushed around by kids that he knew from his school. It was this gang of boys, and the leader of the pack, the gang was led by the leader of the pack named Jericho Wickard. Every time when they saw Claiborne, they would always chase him down and were always threatening to beat him up. The worst that they ever done to him, well, after the gang had beaten him up, Jericho would then leave he had kicked at Claiborne in the head so hard it had left Claiborne with a bad headache for about 2 whole days. And he also had a fractured hand. Now, as for Claiborne's parents, his mother just basically had quit taking care of him. And the reason why is because of drugs. And as for his father, yeah, his mother had ran off because of drugs. And as for his father had passed it away right before he was born. So Claiborne didn't really had anyone out here. He would often to get something to eat. He would go to this Italian restaurant. It was owned by this potbelly man named Gustavo. And he would tell Gus that it was his birthday, even though Gus knew that he was lying, and Gus knew that Clay was homeless and hungry. So Gus would give in and give Clay a free plate of spaghetti with meatballs. And Clay would just gobble it right on up. He able to eat about like 2 plates at his small young age. And he would also go to this bread line that was like at the church. He would go to this bread line to also, get some food. So would try to break up to the front of the bread line and would cause a lot of people to get angry at him. Ride up on his bike, flying like a bird. And that's how he got the name Gutter Snipe. It was this grumpy man inside the line that was saying like, "Hey, get out of the way, Gutter Snipe. You can't just break in line, everybody got to eat too." And Clay, he was quite disrespectful. He had said something really disrespectful back to the man. He have always been a little disrespectful of the kid. And the reason why is because he was just frustrated. He just felt like that he didn't have no one to like care for him in this world. But he ended up coming across and also his mother used to talk to this man that he just calls D. He called him D for short. Claiborne had came by this man's house right around his birthday, right around when it was his birthday, and this man was nice enough to get him a brand new pair of shoes. But right on the same day after school, Jericho and his friends had, beat it up Clay and took his shoes from him, and they also had urinated on him. Like how gross! Clay, which had to just sit there on the sidewalk without his shoes, tears running down his face. He just got tired of getting beat up and punted around by Jericho and his crew. And then Clay ended up coming across this other little boy because he didn't have no friends. Like when he was at school, he was a loner. Kids talked it bad about him, talked about his BO, aka body odor, because it was hard for him to come across soap. It's hard for him to, shower. He often stayed broke. He used to have a job, but he had got caught stealing it. He had lost his job. He was, doing dishwashing. He had came across another little boy named Samuel Sutton. What Clay and him had in common is that they both were going through a lot in their lives. Samuel, he was dying of AIDS. Him, his brother and his mother. And one school day he ended up losing his baby brother. His baby brother was Penuel, and Samuel had woken up soaked and wet. It was like he had, pissed on himself, but really it was his brother that was laying right next to him, cold. He had porcelain looking eyeballs, just glaring right at the ceiling. His little brother Penuel was gone at the age of 3. So Samuel lost his brother on a school day, and he was still strong enough to, go to school, right with his holy Bible. And yes, Samuel was a little 12-year-old boy. He was the same age as Claiborne, and he had a strong faith in God. He was a true Christian that just went to school. He also got teased about it. He was called Bible Boy, all kinds of mean, hurtful names like Clay. And when he came across Clay, Clay was not, interested in talking to him. Like, he was trying to befriend Clay instantly. And Clay, Samuel had came up to him like, "Hey, my name is Samuel." And Clay looked at him and said, "So?" Then, that was when Clay had left out of the bread line. Clay had this plate of food, and Samuel still was walking behind him, wanting to be friends with him with his Bible in his hand. Clay would go to this secluded area to eat the food that he would get from the church. And Samuel had followed him to this secluded area. This secluded area had many other, homeless people just like Clay. And Samuel had sat right by him, started sparking a conversation with him. Samuel was asking Clay, would he like to, have he ever read the Bible before, and would he like to, know about Jesus Christ and all. But Clay was ignoring him. Clay went on ahead and was eating his food. He just did not want to hear anything what Samuel had to say. Samuel was going on saying about how Jesus Christ would bless, someone like Clay. He was just carrying on talking to Clay. And then he had ended up saying he be seeing Clay around the school. He was letting Clay know he knows him. And that's when Clay looked at him. Claiborne looked at him and let him know just because you see me around the school don't mean you know me. Clay was rough around the edges. It was hard to become friends like him. And he also was dealing with mental illness as well. I forgot to mention that Claiborne had messed around with drugs himself at a point in time, but it wasn't as long as his own mother. He got off of it just like that. But his mental state of mind was just, different. He at first did not want to be friends with Samuel, but after a while, him and Samuel had grown close to each other the more they hung around each other and everything. Samuel ended up inviting Clay over his house. And when he had invited Clay over his house, the mama, Samuel's mother, Lummy, she had cooked it like this big pot of soup. And Clay was just happy to be over having a free meal. And right in Samuel's room where his brother had died, he had told Clay about his brother. Clay was letting him know he's sorry about what happened to his brother and all. So Samuel, Clay was sitting there with Samuel in his bedroom, and what when what Samuel had did that had shocked at Clay. Samuel had wanted to hold hands with Clay. He had told Clay to would you like to pray with me before we eat? Because I always pray before I eat. And Clay have never done that at all. He never prayed. He never read the Bible. Clay was just lived a different life from Samuel. And Clay went right along with his friend and bowed his head, and Samuel had led the prayer. And after they had prayed, Samuel, after they had prayed and ate, Samuel had then, Clay had allowed Samuel to, to read the Bible some to him. And Clay was fascinated by the stuff that Samuel was reading to him out of the Bible. So they just grown closer as friends. And also, what Samuel likes about Claiborne is that he has a lot of stories that he could tell Samuel, the stuff that he been through on the streets, what he had witnessed on the streets. He had a lot of stories to tell, and a lot of them he makes it out of comedy, sort of like dark comedy. Samuel would go along with him and laugh. And then Not too long soon after, they had formed a friendship, Clay had came across this girl who he shared classes with. This girl's name was Renee Willoughby. Renee Willoughby originally was in a relationship with Jericho, but she just got tired of being with a troubled boy who had a bad reputation on his hands. Like, she did not want to deal with him no more. She had came across Clay on the streets. She was trying to run away from home because she was having problems in her home. Her mother was going with a man who wasn't her father, and that man was a bruiser to her mother and her. So she wanted it to run away, and her sister had already had ran away, so she basically abandoned Renee, right there in that home. So Renee wanted to leave away herself. So she was at the telephone, but she did not know that well, she was at, like the payphone. She was at this payphone area, but she did not know that the telephone had worked it. That's until Clay had came out and told her that the telephone didn't work it. And she had looked it at him and said in a rude way, like, "Who asked you?" Like, she got, rude with him. Clay just looked at her and said, "I was just saying," and then he had rode off on his bike because he had like a bike that he always rode on. But one day, Renee, she tried to get as far as she can, but her stepfather ended up finding her, and when she had got home, he had, you know, whipped at her. And the mother allowed it because she was scared of him. And so she was, just going through a lot. And then also at school, she had to deal with Jericho. He tried to control her, be over her, and she didn't want to have anything to do with him, but he always went around the school claiming her as his girlfriend. But she ended up coming across Claiborne in Gustavo's restaurant. She had saw him sitting in there just gobbling up a plate of spaghetti. She had sat in front of him trying to, talk to him. But he looks up at her and, he had got up, took the plate of food and got up and left out of there. Like, he didn't want to have nothing to say to Renee. He had thought about the time of how rude she had talked to him by the telephone pole. But she ended up coming across him again on the streets when his eye was like messed up, and then he never told her what happened to his eye. He just said like he had fought about like 5 or 6 boys off of him when really he just got jumped and beat up. She had apologized to him for how she had spoken back to him and everything, and she had started hanging more closer to Clay. One day when they was sitting on this really high bridge, and like underneath this bridge is a railroad track, and you could just watch the train, pass by. Clay, she was sitting right next to Clay, and Clay just went on and told her story just like how he told Samuel, and she loved his stories, and she also started falling in love with him. It was just something about him that she loved. And he also had asked her, like, did he stink to her? And she sniffed him and said that, you know, um, he didn't smell like anything to her. It was just something about him that just made her fall in love with him. And then she leaned over and kissed, and it was like a little puppy love thing, just all romantic, hearts flying everywhere. Jericho did not like this. He had picked up on how nice Renee was towards Claiborne, and that definitely had made him came off after Claiborne all the time. He called himself getting revenge. He had confronted Renee in the girls' restroom at the school, asking her like, "So you really through at me? Like, you really over?" And Renee like, "Yeah, I don't want to have nothing to do with you no more. You stay in trouble too much. Just leave me alone, Jericho." And Jericho did not like that. He blamed it all on Clay. One day when Claiborne and Samuel was walking together, they was walking together, hanging out like they usually do. They was, playing around the neighborhood, just going all over the neighborhood, walking together like friends. And they end up coming upon Jericho and his crew. And dun 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 dun. They got chased. Jericho had snapped his finger one time and told his crew get him. And their crew had ran after Claiborne and Samuel both. And Clay was just running, like he was running without looking back, because that's all he ever did when he saw Jericho and then was ran. He ran and ran because he just couldn't fight all of them. Like he couldn't defend himself. Samuel was trying to keep right up with Claiborne, right with his Bible in his hand. He also had wore this cross chain too that his grandmother had gave him. But he couldn't keep up with Clay, sadly. Jericho ended up pulling out, a pistol, aiming it like how like how had Bishop had aimed at Q in the movie Juice. He aimed it right at Samuel. He was aiming it for um mixed up. He was aiming it at Claiborne, but messed around and hit Samuel right in the back. And when he hit him in the back, it came right through him, like right through like the shoulder part, like near the chest. So Samuel was hit, and then he was hit again, and it was like at the lower part of his back, and that came right through his stomach. So he was hit twice. And when he was hit, he had dropped it to the ground. His Bible had fell, and Clay kept running. He kept running. He thought that Samuel was behind him, but when he had stopped the running, he said, "Samuel, come on!" And he had stopped it when he realized he did not hear no extra footsteps running behind him. He turned around and seen Samuel laying out on the ground, getting bloody. He was gasping for breath, or gasping for air, whatever you call it. He was gasping for air, and he was calling for Clay. He was faintly saying Clay's name, like Clay. He was calling Clay over, and Clay had went to his rescue. Clay had went over there and helped his friend out. Helped him up off of the ground, and helped him back home. Samuel knew that it was his end. Like his life was coming to an end. Like he knew, and he wanted his final resting place to be at his own home. So when when Clay had got him there at his mother's house, Clay had took him in his room and laid him back on the mattress. And then Clay was like, "You wait right here. I'm gonna go in the kitchen and check to see if there's any duct tape or some cotton." Clay was looking for stuff like to he was trying to call himself being a surgeon, getting out the bullets out of Samuel and closing up the bullet wound. He just was unsuccessful with doing that. So instead, he did not know how to get the bullets out. So instead, he did found something to patch up like the wounds, like close up the wounds on Samuel, but that didn't help. Um, that didn't help. Samuel was still bleeding out bad. He was just losing a lot of blood. And Samuel that's when Clay had sat there with Samuel, and he had Samuel's head was in his lap, and Samuel was still shallow breathing, and he was staring up at Clay with weakened eyes, like sleepy looking eyes, and he told Clay like he told Clay he wanted him to take his chain from around his neck. He wanted Clay to keep his chain. And Clay was like, "Oh no, I can't take your chain. No, I can't take that. It's yours." And then and Samuel had told him, said, "You need it more than I do." And he said, "And I want you to take the Bible too, so that you can read it." He wanted Clay to take both of those things. And then he looked it straight in Clay's eyes as Clay was looking down at him and holding him. He had told Clay that if he dies, tell his mother that he loves her. That's what he ended up doing. Samuel had passed it away, right in Clay's arms. Blood had ran out of his mouth, and Clay's eyes had filled up with tears. And he had reached it over and closed it Samuel's eyes. So yeah, Samuel died, and Clay had Samuel's blood all over his hands. So he left Samuel right there in his mattress, and also Samuel you had used it to bathroom on himself as well. Viewers description is advised. So yeah, Clay had left out of Samuel's house with tears in his eyes. He tried to run somewhere to clean the blood off of his hands so it won't make it look like he killed somebody or killed Samuel. And he had ran to Renee's mama's house because he knew where Renee had lived. But the stepfather had answered the door, and when he sees Clay right there, Clay said, "Please, I need to wash my hands." The stepfather had slammed the door right back in his face. Hey, she was stuck in her room. She was not allowed to come out of her room. She just peeked it out her window and saw Clay, having to leave away from their house. So not Samuel. Clay, he had went to Dee's house, his mama's old boyfriend's house, and Dee had welcomed him in. And Dee was seeing all this blood on Samuel's hands and everything. on Samuel's hands. I had a mix. I meant he saw all this blood on Claiborne's hands, and he was like, "Boy, what did you do? Like, what you got yourself into?" And Claiborne has said like it was his friend's blood. Like he told everything what had happened, to Samuel. He told it all to D. And as the days passed by, Clay was sad. He lost his friend, and on top of that, Renee had started keeping her distance from him because she had looked at our window that day and saw all the blood on his hands. She had no idea what the heck he had done did. So she kind of wasn't talking to him for a while. And he had ended up, coming across her one day and asking her why she's avoiding him. And she had told him the truth. She had said, for one, she did not know where all the blood was coming from off of his hands. And for two, Jericho had also threatened her and had told her that if she don't keep away from him, that he is going to end up killing, Clay. And, when Clay had heard this, he ended up coming across, he ended up going where Jericho and them is at. So he ended up finding Jericho. It wasn't Jericho and them that found him. He ended up finding them somewhere, hanging out, talking and laughing and stuff, basically bragging about what they did to Samuel and other kids, possibly. Once they saw Claiborne, they circled around him. They wanted to fight, and Claiborne was ready. He was tired of running. What he said he was tired of running, and when he said he was tired of running, he swung off and hit Jericho, knocked Jericho on his back. And he had, got on top of Jericho to fight him. But all the other boys had jumped it right on top of Claiborne. And once again, Claiborne was jumped, but he called himself sticking up for his friend Samuel. Samuel passed away because of the bullets that came out of Jericho's gun. The older man ended up seeing what was going on, and he ended up helping Claiborne out by getting Jericho and them off of him. And miraculously, Claiborne was not left with no kind of bruises on him. He did not have no kind of blood on him or no kind of scars on him at all after getting beat up like that. But as he was walking to himself, he ended up coming across this small child. It was like an 18-month-old girl, 18-month-old little girl. And her name was, it was a little girl named Gloria Ann. And she was 18 months old, and she was on the sidewalk crawling, and this was an inch away of crawling into the street and getting hit by a car. But Clay had picked this small child up. He was small himself, but he's picked this small child up and carried her off. He knew where the baby came from, and he had carried his baby off to where her mother lived. And her mother, Gloria, was in the bed sleeping. Had no idea that the small baby had snuck out the door. So it happens Gloria had messed around and left her apartment door open, and her baby had snuck out some kind of way. And when she saw Clay standing there with her baby, bringing her baby to her, she was like, "Oh my God, thank you so much. Like, come on in. You want to come in my house?" Like, she invited Clay in, and she also had made him like a plate full of like cut and half sandwiches. And Clay devoured these sandwiches. He ate all of these sandwiches up like he was a part of an eating competition, because that's just how hungry he was. She had gave him sandwiches and something to drink, and asking about his life. And Clay told her the truth that he didn't have nowhere to go. He said that he was homeless, and when she had heard that, that's when she had instantly had told him that he could stay with her. Like, she has a place for him to lay his head at. And she did give him a place to lay his head at. And then she had let him take a shower. She had extra clothes for him to slip on. But when he had took, it was just because Clay been wearing the same clothes like almost every day. And when he had took like a long sleeve shirt off that he had on, he had like a lot of bruises and stuff on his arm and stuff, like cut marks and bruises and stuff on his arm. But the bruises and cut marks did not come from like Jericho and them beating him up or anything. He had did it to himself. Self mutilation, I think that's what you call it. That's what he did because Claiborne, just dealt with, mental illness in his mind. Once you get to know him and get close to him, he is just as nice as he can be. Basically misunderstood. So, Gloria had welcomed him in her home. And after a while, she had permanently let him stay there. So Clay had a home. One night, he did not, return to her home. He stayed out, almost all night. And when he came back in, she had questioned him about his whereabouts. And when once she did that, that's when she seen the disturbed side of Claiborne. He had yelled at her and cursed at her, hurted her feelings so bad, hurted Gloria's heart so bad, like she couldn't say nothing else, left her speechless and about near in tears. But he ended up apologizing and realized that he messed up because he thought in his mind that, oh yeah, she gonna kick me out after I done did that. But she didn't. She washed the dishes and understand that he probably been going through a lot since he been living on the street. So Clay ended up apologizing to Gloria, telling her that he's, sorry for how he's been talking to her. She forgave him instantly and gave him a hug. Like, it's okay, baby. Like, she treated him like he was her son, treated him like a second child. And Clay got really close to Gloria, and he got really close to Gloria's little child. Like, he looked at her like a little sister. He will, take her out to the park with him, like carry her on his like shoulder and stuff. Like, he was really close to the little girl. One day, when Clay was helping Gloria out, he was washing the dishes for her. There was a knock at Gloria's apartment door. When Gloria had opened up her apartment door, it was this older woman who was standing on the outside of the apartment door, and she was holding the baby, and she had asked it for Claiborne. And Gloria, she had closed the door like, hold on just a minute, ma'am. I'm gonna go and get my son. She called it Clay her son. And she had let Clay know there was a woman that was looking for him. The woman's name was Ernestina. She had like a baby in her hands. And Clay went outside and they both had sat like on the benches somewhere and talked it for a good while. And then Clay ended up carrying the baby back into the apartment. Carrying the baby back into the apartment so Gloria can see the baby that the woman had brought up. And so it happens that that little baby was Clay's son. So he became a father at a young age, and it all started off when he was out on the streets homeless. But he had came to meet the child, but he wasn't able to keep the child. I mean, he came to bring the child up for Gloria to meet, but he wasn't able to keep the child because the older woman was already had got into a relationship with another man, and her and that man was planning on getting married and raising that child up, but she wanted Clay to, meet the child. So this story ends with Clay having a home, which is in Gloria's apartment. He has a home, he has a family, he meets Gloria's family, which becomes his family, and that's how the story ends from there. He's not homeless no more. He has happiness. He gets the help that he needs for his mental illness, and that's just how this story ends. Called Guttersnipe, and it takes place in New York City, and it's the early '90s, like 1992. And I hope you like and subscribe. Um, Hit the notification bell if you can. The young, the old, the new. God bless you, and I would like to have you come by my channel and check out the videos. Hope you all have a blessed night, and